Welcome to this month's Impact Investing Network's think tank, monthly think tank, where we are, gathering our minds and our power and our bandwidth to figure out how can we invest and create something that is really good in the world while creating really great returns all the same. They're not mutually exclusive. They can be accomplished. And this month we are really excited. I'm super excited to have Loe. As he said off air, like, I think it was, you were just there, like, I'm his biggest fan. You actually said that. You're like, you're just like this fangirl. I'm like, yep, I have been from the beginning because I love what you do. And a lot of people aren't doing that. And you do such a great job of getting the information out there and setting an example, which is why we invited you here. So I'm going to welcome you fully in just a moment. But before we do that, we're going to go around and just do brief introductions so that everyone can kind of see where are you at, why are you here, what are you hoping to get from it, and go from there. And so I am Julie Hawley. I am host of the Conscious Investor podcast, founder of 3 Keys Investments, and I love real estate investing and the freedom it brings to all investors. I'll turn this over to Brandon, who is beside me on the screen.
Sure. My name is Brandon Plumbon, and I'm a banker here at Pioneer Bank in Minnesota, based out of Mankato. And yeah, real estate investor myself, and just looking to network and reach out. And I know, turns out I didn't realize it till later on. I saw Loe, and apparently we're Facebook friends. So, we've got some mutual people we've worked with in the past up in the cities and storage and stuff. So yeah, a lot of mutual connections there, and just hopping on because I've got a free lunch hour.
Well, this is the best way to spend a lunch hour. Good choice.
Oh, for sure.
High fives to you, Brandon. Awesome. Turning it over to my co-founder, Camilla Jeffs.
Hey everyone, Camilla Jeffs here, founder of Steady Stream Investments, and I invest mostly in multifamily in Arizona, Oklahoma, and North Carolina, and actually working on an assisted living new build in Texas. So Loe, you and I have a bunch of things to talk about. So I'm excited about this and to learn. And also, I just got new baby chicks yesterday, and I'm very, very happy about it.
Oh, I'm just interjecting unprofessionally here that I'm very jealous. We're going mountain biking this weekend, and we had to postpone getting our baby chicks until coming back from a big mountain biking trip. It was tough. It was like
next week.
Next week. Exactly. Awesome. Nina Hawk, another co-founder-ish of the Impact Investing Network.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Nina Hawk. I'm excited to join you guys. Camilla and Julie asked me to help them with this Impact Investment Network. I was very excited. I do not have baby chicks yet, so sorry. Julie, you and I may have to talk offline about that. So I am from Long Island, New York. Very excited to be here. I'm with Recalibrate Capital, which is a multifamily investment firm focused on investments, all over the United States, with focus on smart building technology. In my spare time, if I do have one, I'm also involved with immersive technologies, virtual reality for real estate. If you guys have any questions or interest about that, also feel free to ping me. Thanks.
And we'll definitely talk about chicks. You can have chicks in New York. Chickens make it for very happy. They're great companions.
I only have 2 dogs and 1 cat, and a fish. So now I think we're getting closer to chicks.
You're ready. You were absolutely ready. Matt Kontoth.
Hey, Julie.
Always happy to see you.
Good to see you too. Good to be seen. Well, I don't have any chicks, just an old dog, Cairn Terrier, who's used to be really noisy, but now he just chills napping on the sofa. I'm in the Boston area. I run Red Wing Capital. I invest in syndications passively invested in a bunch of places, and I'm going to be actively invested soon in Alabama or Ohio, and looking forward to learning more about stuff from you guys.
Awesome. So happy you are here. Randy Joe, always great to see you.
Hello, sorry I'm late. I was in another meeting. Good seeing you again, Matt. So I guess we're telling about animals. Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
We got distracted by baby chicks. No, we're just giving a brief introduction who we are and what we're up to.
Okay. So I'm Randy. I'm from Colorado. I am a passive investor. My husband and I are passive investors, and we've been doing this for a couple of years. So that's kind of a little bit about us. So
if you need boots on the ground in Denver, she's a girl. Chris, great to see you.
yes, that's true. Yes.
Hey, how's it going, Jolie and everyone else? So I'm based in Philadelphia and have been, started a winery back in 2013. So I've been able to grow that business. Still serve as the winemaker, though I delegate a lot of the hard stuff nowadays. But I've been working on multifamily over the past year, actively syndicating. And I've been working on assisted living. So I've been trying to invest in this space. However, the labor situation over the past year has really given me pause in this space. And, seeing Loe just really do this the right way, building out the culture, building out the teams, and his approach to building the community kind of gave me, I guess, more hope that this can be a great social impact investing asset class. And so it kind of has renewed my interest, and I've looked to kind of continue in this space and move forward. And so I'm excited to hear today, and excited to meet you, Loe. So looking forward to the conversation.
Okay, well, this is not even like the Will Smith, Chris Rock thing that I have no actual knowledge of, but I could not have planned that better. That was not staged. Like I landed on Chris, and Chris, this is exactly why I invited Loe here, because I think there are a lot of people who really want to break into the assisted living memory care space, and they don't really know how to do it well. It's like we have this one pattern that has been created that's just been, and Loe, you're going to correct all of this if I'm wrong, but like the idea that I think a lot of people have is, okay, well, this is just how it's done and how it's implemented, and these are how the buildings are. And then there's Loe coming in saying, and his team, there's this other way, and it's better, and it's going to build, just like you said, to your point, Chris, it's going to build the culture, it's going to build, and we're going to be able to create something that's going to support people. So,
no, that was like, it was perfect. I mean, I signed on late, so I just like came into this, but it's one thing where you attend all of the association meetings, the assisted living meetings in all these different states, and you see operators that are trying to run it, not as a business, but as like owner operator, right? And they're tired and they're cutting costs, and then suddenly like cut employees. So then now it's just them running it. And it's a downward spiral that has really negative outcomes for the residents. And then, so you see that on like the small residential type model. And then you see Loe over here, building out these like beautiful communities and creating, like fostering these like beautiful relationships. And you see much more positive outcomes from that. So just excited to hear from someone who's doing it the right way. And I think it totally fits like with like the conscious investor mindset, instead of just, oh, we're always trying to think, oh, we're investors, we need this return. Well, we can also have an important impact on people's lives too. And then along with that, a return, we can certainly get a return.
Love it. Well, star of the show today, Loe, thank you so much for coming and joining us. And I think actually, just some of those comments from Camilla, hey, I'm actually doing new development in assisted living, and Chris, and you see like people are really into this, and I think you're the best role model out there. So I'm going to turn it over to you. I will let you introduce yourself and tell about your background and all the awesome things that you are doing and creating, and anything else.
Well, thanks. I think half my job is to convince everyone not to get into assisted living and memory care. And then if they go and do it anyway, then make sure they're doing it the right way. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. So yeah, so I live in kind of the Dallas area. I'm currently on the border of Texas and Oklahoma right now. It's kind of home for me, but I maintain a home in sort of the DFW area, and then I live about an hour and a half commute back and forth. So I usually spend 3 or 4 days in town, and then when I get tired of talking to people, I run off to the border of Oklahoma and don't talk to anyone with my dog. So no worries. Happy to be here. I came all the way out to my kitchen to do this. So that was an easy commute. My background is I was in business. I ran a car dealership for about 12 years. And it's a very natural transition to sell warranties on Hondas to taking care of people with dementia. It's a very natural progression. There's really no steps in between. I knew when I was in the finance department at a dealership in Shreveport, I would soon be taking care of folks with dementia. There was just it was totally linear progression. There was no steps along the way that threw curveballs. In case you haven't figured out, that was pure sarcasm. The reality is that I loved the part of dealerships that I hated is dealerships can be very transactional. Right? You buy a car, you leave, maybe we see you in 3 or 4 more years, but there was actually a part of the business that people don't really fully understand that was very relationship based, which is that if you have a situation that lends itself to maybe you can't get approved for a car. And some people think, well, if you can't get approved for a car, it's because you have bad credit, but there are other situations. Let's say you have personally great credit, but you got 5 cars in your name. And you go try to buy a 6th car, and the bank's like, hey, that's too many cars. If something happens, we know that, the 6th car is not gonna be real high on their priority list. So there was somebody that was talking the bank into approving your loan on terms that were acceptable. So that was primarily what I did. So it's called rehashing. And the thing about rehashing that's kind of interesting is that we're talking about like the course of a month, several hundred loans. And so you're calling the same people, ask them to help you over and over and over again. So you have to know what the status of your relationship is, when you can press, when not to press, which deals to risk, the dealerships and your reputation on. And so that was the part of business that I really enjoyed. And so as kind of time went on, I sort of realized I kind of started to see the distinction that I don't really like doing things that are transactional. But I do enjoy doing things that are relationship based. So I really enjoy managing relationships and that part of it, but I don't really enjoy trying to, I think a lot of people around me would say that I'm a great salesperson. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I think I'm a really good manager of relationships. And so often that translates into, kind of being successful at sales. But so that's kind of my background. My dad had a really bad experience on hospice in 2014. And it kind of started me on this process. And a lot of people that are in the business are in the business for personal reasons. I think a lot of investors, because, and we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot about the investment, kind of philosophy piece, but a lot of investors have had personal connection to something happening to their family, and that's why they wanted to get into the space. So I started Sage Oak about a year after my dad passed away, kind of with the idea that I don't know that maybe consciously I made the connection between the two. I think it would be probably misleading, like, oh, my dad passed away, I became inspired. It was more like my dad passed away and I was looking for something and trying to figure something out. And I think I just kept being kind of led and kind of pushed in this direction. For those of you that want to assign cosmic intent to these sort of things, feel free. But I just ultimately, I was working in an apartment complex. I was running a 400 unit complex as a property manager. And the summer was approaching, and about 30% of the tenants were Section 8 tenants. And if you don't know what summers are like on a Section 8 community, I'll be happy to tell you sometime. It is not fun. The community runs a little different when there's like 100 or 80 extra kids running around wreaking havoc on the place. And so my favorite story from being in the apartment business was there was some kids that were destroying an HVAC unit. And the funny thing was, it was the HVAC unit to their own apartment complex, to their own building. And I'm like, I don't think this is going to go as well as you think it might. So I realized that, hey, there's plenty of people that's their lot in life, to chase children around the apartment complex. I decided, hey, I don't have kids for a reason. So let me get out of this business. And so I got into kind of the assisted living business. And what I kind of figured out kind of quickly is that it's one of the few businesses, I think, where you can become a thought leader in like a really short period of time. And it's because there aren't a lot of people that are really doing things that different in the business. There's a lot of people that are deviating very small from the central core tenet of ideas. And so it's a business that's both technology resistant, and prime for disruption. If you think about a lot of things that have been disruptive, they're usually technology based. But if something's technology resistant and prime for disruption, you have to sort of disrupt the way you think. And that's a little bit different business. So that's kind of what kind of drew me into the space, was personal reasons. And then I quickly realized there just weren't a lot of people that were thinking about the business in the same way I was. And anytime I think you find some success and do so kind of doing things your own way that are more authentic and kind of true to yourself, then I think that's something you have to pay attention to. So our core business is assisted living and memory care. We operate, develop, and raise capital for that ourselves. We're also developers. So we've done some apartment complexes, some single family homes, some of that type of stuff. So we enjoy building and creating. I almost never buy anything that's existing. I'm not against it. I just think I like doing things the hard way, apparently. Ultimately, if you think about it, because I know the show's about, conscious investors, and this is not, I know there's a lot of apartment investors on here, but if you buy an apartment complex, you spruce it up, you raise the rents, you can make a case whether or not society is better or not for you having done that, right? It's debatable. Obviously you can take positions on that, and this is not a knock, but if you create something, if you build something, then you put something there that didn't exist before. Now, you can debate that too. Maybe that field or that wetland that you build on was more important than that apartment building or assisted living facility you built, right? So I think the thing about conscious investing, impact investing, is you have to kind of decide your own values and what it is that you want to do to society, because there's always a sort of a counterpoint, right? There's always a counterpoint to whatever it is that you're doing, right? So that's kind of our kind of perspective on that. And I guess I'll maybe tell you a story to lead into probably what I hope is going to be Julie's subsequent questions, because if not, I really wasn't prepared for a 42-minute monologue. But I had an investor one time sitting across the table from me, and someone else found him and introduced me to him. He flew to Dallas to have a conversation with me. And he said, I've invested money in an oil deal and I lost all my money, and I didn't feel very good about that. And he said, I hope you don't lose my money, but if you lose my money trying to do this, I don't think I'm going to be upset. And that kind of got my gears turning. And I kind of realized that we spend a lot of time thinking about certain things, but we really don't ask investors really great questions. They don't really understand what's important to them. And a lot of times I think we get caught up in we're analyzing deals. This one's better, this one's worse. And we don't really necessarily stop and think about the second and third order impacts of what our investments may mean. And I think we're reaching an age where that's becoming strongly considered. You don't really have to go very far in recent history. Just take a look at, sort of the economic fallout of the Russia-Ukraine situation. You've had a lot of companies that henceforth had been tolerant of Russian behavior, and now, en masse have pulled out, of doing business in Russia. So these are companies that are making decisions, whether it be for their brand or for their own personal reasons, that they're better off not doing business in the country, right? So I think it goes to show you that there's plenty of people that put different ideals and missions above just money, right? Because obviously it's not cheap if you're a McDonald's, it's not cheap to just pull out of a country and then have said country reappropriate your building with a similar logo and like, welcome to the new Russian McDonald's, right? So that's an expensive decision. And a lot of companies made that decision. A lot of countries have made that decision. And so I think it kind of goes to show you that money is not the only thing that matters in business. And it's not the only thing that matters in investing. And so if that's true, then that means kind of, impact investing, conscious investing is about finding what those other things are for your investors, and finding the right group of investors that are willing to take that mission or take that journey with you. So that's a little about me, and then just a little bit about kind of my conversations with investors about this sort of topics.
I love it. Absolutely appreciate you so much. So here's an area where I'm not sure that everyone understands what you are doing and how you are changing the face of assisted living and memory care. There is a podcast episode created on this, but a lot of things have transpired since you and I recorded a podcast episode over a year ago. And even with how you've funded the very first development project, Sage Oaks and everything. So if you don't mind, walk us through Sage Oaks, walk us through the thinking behind it, because everything about that is meticulously thought out, the buildings, the usage, the financing, everything down to the cooks, everybody, the nutrition, everything is just top shelf.
Sure. Well, thank you. So I think the thing to understand is first you have to kind of, in order to understand, development or design, you have to understand what problem it's sought out to solve. So I think understanding the problem is kind of the critical thing, because otherwise, nothing really makes sense until you understand what came before it, right? So essentially for the last several years, anybody that's been in any real estate conferences lately or been on any, been around the guru circles, understand that there's quite a few people that are pushing this residential assisted living model. So that's kind of off on one hand. For example, nobody, like Brookdale isn't hosting real estate conferences like you should be a Brookdale franchise, that's not happening, right? So there's kind of on the one hand, let's on the more traditional way of doing things, although that's probably a bit misleading and get back to that. But on what we think of as traditional way of doing assisted living and memory care is, 100, 200 bed facility, maybe a mid-rise, and you have a bunch of congruent folks in there. And, some of them are very nice. Some of them, anyway, the point is the building, the shell is all pretty much the same. The concepts are all pretty much the same. Then on kind of the other end, you kind of have these sort of residential assisted living, which is, sort of designed to sort of be a counterpoint to those types of facilities. Well, the problem is they both have really good advantages. I make fun of big buildings all the time, but they have some strengths. I think they have too much market share. So big buildings, the problems they have is that they often run kind of bad staffing ratios. Okay, well, that's not really the building's fault, right? You could change that operational approach, but even still, you've got elevators, you've got long hallways, you've got restaurant style community dining and some of the advantages that come with that. So for example, think about regular people. Most people like to have a mix of incredibly social dinners, and they also eat at home, some alone, right? Very few people always eat alone, and very few people always eat in a big community style setting, right? Makes sense. So why would seniors be any different, right? It's not like you turn 75 and you're like, man, I really hope I can walk 150 yards down the hallway, go down an elevator and eat food with 80 people I barely know. Like that's the thing, right? So that's kind of a flaw with the building and the model. The other thing is they're really pretty bad at outcomes. They can't really handle people that need a lot of care. If you're mobility and challenged, long hallways are bad. If you have a cognitive impairment like dementia or Alzheimer's or something in that kind of category, then long hallways can be confusing. How do you determine which room is yours? You don't necessarily know which room number you live in. So there's just a lot of like operational outcome problems with big buildings, but it's the way most people have done it. The advantage that it has scaling, and it has, enough revenue and enough beds that you can kind of put every seat in the bus and get it full in terms of your employees. Well, on the flip side, you have RAL, which is sort of being touted as this, by a lot of folks, me not being one of them, but is being touted as this kind of cure-all. You do this, it's very easy to get in it, and you have all those things. But the problem is, if you buy one 10-bed facility, you've either done one of two things. Either you have a job, or you're hired everybody and you're not making any money. There's no way. There's just not possible. There's just no way that you can have a executive director, a nurse, a tour and marketing person on 10 beds. So what you end up having to do is you have to acquire multiple 10-bed facilities, multiple 8-bed facilities, multiple 16-bed facilities, whatever the case may be. You have to build a portfolio. The analogy is not altogether different for those of you that are familiar with between single family and multifamily, right? And so you kind of have these two stark kind of contrasting models that have great advantages and great flaws. And so, I'm just kind of a redneck. So I was like, well, what if we just put them together and just did it that way? And so our model is essentially we build residential care homes, but all on one campus with a common management building. So we have all the intimacy outcomes, food. Think about food. Who here has cooked for 100 people? You've done it. It's not easy, right? Some of y'all struggle with Thanksgiving, but for a professional chef, Thanksgiving is like a small, that's a small get together, right? So in a lot of senior housing, they're turning out food for 400 or 500 people. Just think about that for a second. If you cook an amazing meal and you've got to disseminate that food to 500 people, all spread out through a campus, what do you think the average time is from the moment it's done to the moment it arrives to the resident? 30 minutes, 45 minutes? Anybody ever get to go food that tastes better than at the restaurant? Of course not, right? Transportation and food is a real issue. So just imagine for a moment a campus of care homes You pull up on the campus, let's just say it's 100, let's just say it's 10 10-bed homes. That's not our model, but it's just easier numbers people keep track of. So 10 10-bed homes. So when you pull on the campus, there's 10 chefs cooking, lunch or dinner or breakfast for 10 houses. That's not one meal service, it's 10 meal services. So think about what that means. You got a bunch of Catholics in a house, you can have fish on Friday, right? Kind of harder to do in a big building. So you kind of solve a lot of problems by this sort of care home model, but you also then benefit from things like transportation. You also benefit from the ability to kind of pivot into a niche. For example, a classic thing is, by show of hands, who's heard of memory care? Okay, so pretty much everyone on the call. And who's heard of a specialized Parkinson's unit for assisted living? Probably no one. It's pretty rare, right? So why is that? Well, it's because maybe there's not enough Parkinson's to justify a whole unit for it. But when you divide into smaller segments, it's very easy to do that. As an example, one thing you hear about a lot in this space is if you are 35 years old and you're riding your motorcycle and you hit your noggin one day, you generally wind up in skilled nursing around a bunch of 85 or 90-year-old people, and you feel very much out of place. So traumatic brain injuries is an area where you can do kind of specialization. So really basically the limit on what you could specialize in when you get into smaller care homes is limited only by your imagination and your ability to market, right? You could have a house that's kosher. The newspaper comes in Hebrew, right? You do that for a few years, your relationship with the rabbi diminishes. You can take down the Hebrew newspapers and reconfigure to some other niche or some other sub-demographic that feels like needs service in your area. So essentially what our model does is it combines the scaling of a big building, the ability to impact a marketplace like a big building can. Then we still have all the same outcomes and all the same benefits of the care home. So it really is an elegant model that we think will catch on. Because the other thing that's kind of happening in the industry, and this is just industry experts. I have no opinion about anybody in their generation, but there's a word on the street that people think the baby boomers are going to be a little difficult to deal with when it comes to assisted living and memory care. Now, that's not me saying that. I'm just parroting back what all the subject matter experts do. And so if that's the case, they're going to want personalization. Right? There's probably not a lot of people that don't think that baby boomers are going to want personalization, right? So if baby boomers are going to want personalization, are they going to want to be in a small, intimate environment, or are they going to want to be in a big environment? Probably a small, intimate environment, but some of them are very social. So they want to do fun things. So having a campus of people all located on a thing, you can have big activities if you want to, but it's a choice. Whereas in a 100-bed facility, it's kind of a forced thing that you have to do. So essentially what we've basically done is, from a building perspective, from a campus perspective, we just kind of reimagined how the space would look. And it leads to a lot of really cool stuff. Like we don't have any elevators, like we're all single story. Why would you, right? So there's just, the building is kind of fundamentally different. And then I think operationally, and so this is one of the reasons why we don't really want to be a large company, is there's actually no such thing as a national senior housing brand. That doesn't exist. Because what ends up happening is everyone's experience is very personal. If you go to a McDonald's all over the country, your range of quality outcomes are pretty narrow. Like, the cheeseburger is going to taste approximately the same as it has most of your life. Yeah, you'll get some outliers or whatever, some standard deviation, as they say in the mathematics community. But the point is the hamburger will be roughly the same. You can go to any assisted living facility that's under a common brand, and your experience will be so vastly different that a brand is irrelevant, because all that matters is if you had a good experience, they're good. If you had a bad experience, they're bad. And so brands are really not a thing, national brands. So really in senior housing, it's more of a regional, local perspective. And so what we really want to do is we really want to be kind of a strong, medium-sized company. Our goal right now is to have 1,000 beds in DFW, which would make us a very powerful presence in DFW. And you're probably thinking, well, if you want to change the world, how do you change that in DFW? I'm like, well, I hope someone copies me, or, I can license something or something, because I have no interest in, going all over the country and doing this, because it's just too complicated. It's too complicated to reestablish all those things. And so what we really want us to do is just really, really solve the quality problem in an area, and then have the opportunity for other people to adopt best practices. But I digressed a little bit. The reason why we don't want to be a big national company is because big national companies think like this: I'm going to write a bunch of policies and procedures, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to find a square peg for this square hole. And anybody that's done any hiring in the last 3 years will tell you that's not possible. You can't do it. So the best companies find talented, smart, driven, mission-focused people, and they ask themselves, what does this person do well? What don't they do well? And then they design policies and procedures around their unique gifts. And then they support them in that way. So in order to do that, you have to have somebody sort of leading the orchestra, sort of curating the experience. So it's not like other situations. And it's why you see some companies. And so I think in this day and age with the labor and the stuff that we're dealing with from a demographics perspective, you have to reimagine how you do operations. If you don't, then I think you're a bit like a dinosaur that's watching the meteor. You think the meteor is very pretty, and maybe it is until it's not. And so that's kind of what I feel about the industry in general. So that just kind of gives you a little perspective. So I really think the two main differences are, our buildings are very innovative and forward thinking, and they were designed by an operator. We don't have to have the arguments between the developer and the operator, since we're both. And then the second thing is that we take an operational approach that people are first, and that process and systems should support people. And a lot of people do it the other way around, and we just think that model is broken, especially in the modern labor environment.
I love it. I think everybody, you're just like fueling everybody, because in the chat box there are all these conversations of, is this fantastic information, Loe? I love it. So when you guys designed, can you talk a little more specifically, because you talked about the difference, like why you designed how you did, but the actual layout, and I don't know if you can screen share, if you have it handy, the actual layout of Sage Oaks. But the layout is even it reminds me of a cluster neighborhood, or cluster housing, right? So just the way it's situated on the land and everything, very friendly. So even down to that, it's a very interesting model. And then at your convenience, love to hear about the financing, because not many people are willing to do what you and your partners did, and it's really powerful. If you're comfortable talking about that.
You might have to. There you go. You might have to remind me what specifically you resonated with about our financing. It's all just a blur to me, but I'm sure there's a specific question you have in your mind.
I'll bring it back up. We'll talk about this and then I'll bring it up.
So this is a site plan from our website. So these are pretty unusually shaped houses. So you guys can see my mouse, yes?
Yep.
All right, so the first thing here is you've got this building right here. So this is a standalone building. So that's a sales and admin office. It's probably one of the simplest things someone can sort of steal from our ideas, which is that. So there are other people that have done these types of developments, and one of the things I sort of noticed that a lot of them didn't have is they said, "Oh, well, we'll just save money. We'll put the offices inside the care homes." But if you understand the tour process is very intimate, you ask a lot of questions. You want to understand what's going on with somebody. It's really more of a fact-finding thing. Doing, a tour in the middle of a dynamic environment is a bit challenging at times. But also, too, the thing that's kind of interesting is that, how great in a pandemic in which you're restricted sometimes from who can come in and when they can come in and all the things that you have to do, to be able to have, the ability to tour and answer questions without ever stepping foot in a building here that has residence house in it. So, sales and leasing office for us is a big key differentiator. This is not a inexpensive thing to build, but having meeting space and collaborative space and space to collide, it's one of the things that really doesn't exist in RAL. You don't necessarily have a space to meet or collide or collaborate, and so we thought that was a really important piece. So, if you look at this, if you didn't know what this was, and I just showed this to you, you would probably assume this was a regular neighborhood. That's the point. So these houses are about 8,500 square feet, roughly. So these are about 8,500 square foot single houses. Under roofs, probably about 9,000 or so. So that kind of gives you a little bit of idea. But if you'll notice these shapes here, you kind of see this area here, this area here. These houses are designed kind of as like fat H's. Doesn't quite look that way from the roof line, but essentially what happens is you have a quadrant of bedrooms, hallway, quadrant of bedrooms, quadrant of bedrooms, quadrant of bedrooms, and all of that is a big open common area, kitchen, dining, living room, all of that. And so what that did was our longest hallway is 45 feet. So on this entire campus, which is, these are just say 9,000 times 6 plus this, it's just a shade under 60,000 square feet. But it's going to house 96 seniors in it. Our longest hallway is 45 feet. So you had to bring in some design concepts and elements to do that, because there's a lot of buildings that house 96 people and their longest hallway is 450 feet. So just think about that. Like, think about if you're a mobility challenge, you need to go down that every day, right? That'd be hard. If you're confused, what that means, if you're a little introverted, like the bigger the barrier for you to walk a long way, to go down an elevator, to go have a meal with people, that's a pretty big barrier, right? So this drives engagement. This drives people into the common area because they're more willing to come out. But it's more than that. Think about falls. Most caregivers are not, running 4.2 40-yard dashes. They're a little slower than that. And so the further you get away from somebody, the faster you have to be to stop them from falling. There's just a lot of reasons why long hallways really aren't ideal in this space. And so our building design takes care of that. And then you can obviously kind of see we have the opportunity here for, a park-like setting for residents and families to go outside, obviously, very important in a pandemic as well. And so that's really just kind of gives you kind of a sense of kind of how we're doing things a little differently from the physical plant perspective. This is our community in Denton. This floor plan here actually won the Senior Housing News Architecture and Design Award for 2021. So for standalone memory care. So our Denton community, it hasn't applied yet because it's not open yet, but we plan to apply for Denton as well. But this won a National Architecture and Design Award for probably the largest publication for trade professionals and what we do. And it's not one of those things where you vote. It's a panel of experts deciding which one they felt like fit their criteria. So this model really is, we think very forward thinking, and it's not because we want to, read our own press clippings or whatever. We just understand that as operators, we built the things that we wish, buildings and communities had, and we did so in a way that allows us to, and frankly, the funny thing is that our cost to build these are actually probably a little less than a big building. There's a lot of dead space and a lot of dead expenses. So just kind of a classic example. In Texas, if you go to 17, you're a large type B. And just like a simple example, the fire rating on your gypsum board or your sheetrock has to go up. Well, does anyone think that anyone in assisted living and memory care is going to pay more rent because the fire rating on the gypsum board is different? Of course not, right? So it's just an extra expense. And so, when you go from residential to commercial, you have many different standards of what types of electrical wiring you can or can't use. So again, no one's going to pay more or less for assisted living or memory care based on the types of electrical wiring used. So what this does is allows you to focus on things that really matter. A good bathroom that's easy to navigate, an engaging common area, sight lines that allow you to reduce falls, great outdoor space. Those are the things that really matter in this business. It's not, a lot of it's not gyms and chandeliers, which a lot of other companies have really kind of sold themselves on. I was like, look, if we just make our chandelier nicer, then, these people that have all these ailments and concerns and conditions and challenges are going to pay more. And that's fundamentally not what we think is true. We think this is, more of a, it's more of a healthcare management business than it is a hospitality business. It can be a hospitality business on the various ends of the spectrum, and that there's certainly people that are successful at that model. But hospitality is not my forte, but trying to be responsible for outcomes for people seems more so. So that's kind of the layout of the campus. Happy to answer any questions about that. I have more information. I just didn't have it readily at my fingertips. So sorry about that.
No, you're fantastic. All this information is so pertinent and so helpful, because you really are a front runner on, changing the way this is, executed. And so I do want to go ahead and open it up to questions before we go on, because I don't want to run out of time for your questions to, be answered. So if you have a question, please feel free, unmute yourself and just ask your question. If you're not comfortable doing that, then you're welcome to put it in the chat box as well. everybody's overwhelmed. They're like, this is so good. I do want to ask about the financing a little bit. That was a question that I was like, we can touch on. And so correct me if I'm wrong, you and your partners, you guys really executed on this on your own.
Yeah. So, well, no, I mean, obviously, no. So this is a syndication. Yeah, so there was phases that we've done, but yes, this is a syndication. So we raised about, I think for this particular project, I think 5.6 million or so roughly. So this is a $5.6 million raise. This actually also happens to be in an opportunity zone, which made the raise kind of interesting. So, I'm like one of the few, I've actually done 2 opportunity zone deals, and every time I meet someone, like no one's ever done one. Yeah, so, but a lot of times it's just very interesting. Texas has some very interesting situations. The census runs every so often. And so there's some areas of Texas had such explosive growth that some areas are quote unquote rural, but they're not really anymore. So we thought this was just kind of an outlier in the opportunity zone. But yeah, so I guess what I would say is that for us, we think that our development projects can often be kind of in a low to mid 20s internal rate of return. Mind you, we keep them a long time. So generally on 10-year pro formas. So for some people that's a turnoff. For some people that's simple, because one of the downsides of sort of the current I guess the market's kind of the current marketplace for income streams, right? That's what real estate is, right? It's an income stream. The current marketplace for income streams is pretty, I would say that it's not a very pure market, and that there's a lot of things happening with people manipulating things, right? Like injecting a lot of money into the system. So what ends up happening is you have all these people that are chasing yield. And so like a lot of apartment investors, like you buy something and then like 2 years later you sell it, which is awesome. You made some money, you did something, but then you have to figure out what to do with your money again. And so you're just like constantly, so it's not that passive, because you're like, some people just bet on the jockey, but sometimes your jockey doesn't have enough deal flow. So you're just like constantly looking for something. You're trying to get in relationships. You end up going to all these conferences and doing all this stuff. And, so there's like some people love that stuff, but like, that's not exactly passive, right? So to me, passive is you invest in something and for 10 years, you get distributions, you get updates, and then one day it sells and maybe you repeat that process. So maybe if you'd have traded 4 or 5 times out of a traditional storage deal or traditional apartment deal, and you just been in this for 10 years, just sort of kind of running in the background. So there's some people that really resonate with that. There's some people that don't. I've seen some surveys that said, I think 5 years is kind of the preferred investment timeline for most passive investors, kind of in our generalized circle. Different investors have different goals, but so an advantage or disadvantage of this is the 10-year horizon. So, for those of you that are math experts, that it's pretty hard to achieve a 20% IRR over 10 years. Most of the time you see those, over 20 IRRs, it's because someone sold something really fast, which you'll see a lot of in a distorted market, right? So basically I bought something, I didn't operate it any better. Someone just paid more for it than I did because the income stream was more valued by them than it was by us, right? So that's kind of in the state of income streams these days. So that's kind of what this is and kind of what that looks like. So I think, from the investment perspective, I think one thing to consider is there's a lot of people that'll be okay making less money if they feel like what they're doing is a good thing, So if your mom or dad had dementia, then you probably really appreciate giving families some comfort during a period of time like that. If your mom, fell and broke her hip and passed away from their subsequent surgery, you're probably pretty attuned to how do I stop falls in seniors. And obviously, I think a model like this really lends itself. So I guess what I'm trying to say is not that, I guess what I'm trying to say is figure out what it is about your opportunity that will speak to the types of investors that you have and phrase it and parse it that way. I think one of the things that we see a lot of is that people do these types of things. They haven't had enough investor conversations. They don't really know how to talk to an investor about this element of it, right? There are lots of other currencies beyond money, right? There's currency, for the soul. There's currency for how you feel, right? And so sometimes investing in stuff that you think is good for society it has positive benefits for the investor beyond just return. And the flip side is also true. Some people would never invest in a tobacco deal. Some people would never invest in something that involved weapons. Some people would never invest in, certain other individuals types of deals. So, there people have standards and lines they will or won't cross on investing. And sometimes it's not just about money. Often it's not. There's lots of types of investments that, nobody on the call would do. But there's somebody that would do them because they get funded.
True. Very, very true. Okay, I know we're gonna run shy on time on this. I want to understand for myself personally, and I think it'll help other people who may want to be an ambassador, since you don't want to become a national brand with this, and you want everyone to work on this on their own, basically, which I completely understand. How many acres is this on? And where did you situate this in proximity to a city and things like that?
Yeah, so there's a company, NIC, that does tons of zip code data, so you can get that readily available in most major markets. And you can see, occupancy by zip code, occupancy by zip, rents by zip, all that stuff. So, I think finding supply demand imbalances is really, just like anything else, kind of the key. So we're generally going to need about 6 acres. Our focus is DFW, so Texas. I have a community in Louisiana was our first sort of opportunity to do this. Whether we add a community close by, maybe just across the border in Texas, or another Louisiana community, sort of remains to be seen. But sort of our main focus is going to be on Dallas and Texas, and then obviously if we build say 8 or 10 of these in Dallas and we're still having fun, maybe we consider another market. But the thing is, states are so different, and so I don't necessarily understand. There's this mentality among some other people where they just get a few deals in every state. And I sort of understand the advantages of diversity, but it's a lot of brain damage to know the different rules in the different states. It can be really kind of challenging. And you see a lot of missteps when they get out in different markets. There's just a big cultural difference. I mean, the thing about, I was at a conference of the day, and it was just very interesting. This is one of the only businesses where you can be a rock star in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, and you can be a rock star in New York. And that's not a shot at Iowa. I'm just saying, just imagine those two people at a conference. It's always a little weird. And so, because the thing is, there's nursing homes, there's assisted living, there's memory care in Iowa, it's in Miami, so it's just kind of everywhere. And so there's a lot of people that are doing really great work in just places you've never heard of, or places you've never kind of think about. And so when they all kind of get together and kind of collide, it's kind of fascinating. But so in terms of that, I mean, ultimately, probably what will wind up happening in terms of helping people out is we'll probably either start to consult or start to license, this model to other people. I don't really take on students anymore. I kind of retired from that business. But generally what I'll do is I'll send somebody to someone that will kind of get them the foundational training. And on a case-by-case basis, I'll work with people who I feel get it. Because for me, if I'm going to invest any time in somebody, if it doesn't have, and they pay me, that's fine. But if it doesn't actually lead to anything, it's kind of a waste of my time, because they can't really pay me enough to make it worthwhile to waste the time. I guess if that makes any sense. I'd rather just be doing something. So I like to work with people that I think will actually, get it done. So they have kind of a certain, amount of grit or certain sort of foundation for success. And, so that's kind of what makes me a little bit different, is I'm not really looking for any consulting students, but I think that it'll come a point when I'll want to do that, because my best chance for, getting this in, say, Florida or Seattle, if I don't want to go, is to help someone, plant a seed there that will grow into something.
No tire kickers. Just go back to your automotive roots, right? No tire kickers.
No, tire kickers are fine at the car dealership, but at the Sage Oak, I got other things to do.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. Are there any other, I think we've touched on all the questions that were dropped in the chat box. Does anyone else have, as we round down, get close to the hour, does anybody have any other questions?
I've got a question, Loe.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm just curious, what are some of your largest, challenges that you're faced with in your role in your day-to-day type operations? What are your issues that you're trying to overcome?
Yeah. So, I think if you survey 100 CEOs in assisted living and memory care, the top 3 issues are going to be staffing. So I think that's just kind of kind of the challenge. And it's, look, I think we have a very disingenuous conversation happening in this country about like minimum wage laws and like, things like that. We always kind of center it in like the restaurant industry. We always do that. We always go, oh, what if we need $15 an hour than burger flippers, and it becomes this whole conversation that's very political. But like, when it comes to like taking care of your grandmother, do you really want them making $8 an hour? Do you really want them making $10 an hour? And then who on the call would do that? No, a lot of us would flip burgers for $10, but very few people would, take care of someone, clean them, shower them, feed them, deal with their mood swings brought on by cognitive impairment and depression. And that's a lot, right? So I think we all probably agree that probably caregivers and healthcare workers probably deserve a raise. But then, and this is where we get in the sticky spot, $20 an hour caregivers is going to be $10,000 a month assisted living, right? So you got a choice to make. I think as an operator, you have to figure out, do you want to solve a quality issue or do you want to solve a cost issue? Because I think there's a mutual exclusivity, because again, disruption happens in tech. Tech is very sort of low labor intensity. Well, when you're taking care of people, it's very high labor intensity. And so I think every operator kind of comes to a crossroads where you kind of make a decision. Do I want to help the person that can only pay $3,500 a month for their mom or dad? Or do I want to exploit my workforce? That's fundamentally what you have to do. Or do I want to, create living standards for my team and then just have to say no to the person that can only pay $3,500, because you just can't, you can't compensate your people well and have the appropriate amount of staffing. And so I think for me, $4,000 a month assisted living is dead. That's just not the model I want to pursue. But, the way we kind of look at it is there's a lot of people right now that are charging $6,000 a month and they're giving you $3,000 a month in value, so if we're like, all right, if we can charge $7,500 and give you 10, that seems like a better way to do it. So staffing's a real challenge. We've actually, I think we're pretty close to having a real solution for that. For us, the issue with staffing is it's demographic in nature. So you just got enough aging and you don't have people that are willing to be healthcare workers in the same space. This is not just an assisted living or memory care problem. I think there's only really one short to medium term solution, which is that you need to let a bunch of people come to America on special visas. Because there's a ton of people that would be happy to come to America to be healthcare workers. And we could probably use about 2 million of them. Like, think about that, like 2 million. That number is going to continue to widen and widen and widen. There's a great book called Who Will Care for Us? They kind of go through the demographics of that. It's a little older, so it doesn't even sort of take into account sort of the sort of COVID labor sort of impact. We're actually using a software we're kind of like maybe a partner in it. We haven't officially signed any agreements, but essentially we're using a CRM system, but for applicants. Everyone has a thing where they manage people they hire, right? They have HR software, but nobody really has a applicant management software. So the cool thing about what we're doing in that space is what ends up happening for most operators. Just think about this for a second. Let's say you've been an operator for 2 or 3 years, and every time you need a job, you post a job and 100 people apply and you go through the filtering process, and a lot of them don't show up for the interview or whatever's happening, and it happens. Well, most people are taking that data and they're just like throwing it out, right? Or it's just on Indeed somewhere or some job board, but they don't have a central place to use it. So kind of my thinking on the process was, what if you just captured everyone that applied for every job that you've ever posted in history? And then when you need somebody, the first place you go is back to that list. Like, hey, we got night shift available. Here's the times, here's the money. You send it to 2,000 people and you hope 2% respond. So we've got that software working right now. We're beta testing it. We've got some automated systems. It's pretty hilarious, especially because so speed to lead's definitely a thing, right? So if someone goes to try to book a tour in your assisted living facility, if you respond in 5 minutes, you have a much higher probability of booking a tour. Think about job applicants, and also think about job applicants who often work night shift. So if I start applying for a job at 2:30 in the morning, ostensibly maybe I'm at my other job and I'm pissed and start to apply. And then I apply, and then all of a sudden I start having a conversation that I think is with a person that's actually with a chatbot. asking me a series of questions, pre-screening me, and then booking an appointment to come do an intro call, if that's your method, or booking an appointment to book a job interview. I've now just spoken to an applicant at 2:30 in the morning. I was asleep, they were awake, but whatever emotional state they were in to apply for a job, which by the way can be fleeting, they just booked an appointment to come show up for a job interview. So there's some things you can do. The problem with that is that fundamentally that just means you have to get your unfair share, right? So basically the way to win at labor, you just have to like rethink the whole approach to labor. It won't solve the problem. We'll still have 2 million too few caregivers, but that'll be someone else's problem to manage. So, we're really trying to be creative on the HR side of the business. I think probably the best advice I can give you, if you're in assisted living and memory care, fundamentally, you are a human resources company. I have more, I probably, for 200 beds, I probably have more employees than people with 2,000 doors, right? So it's just a very different situation in terms of your labor. And so if you don't know how to lead people, the answer is not in spreadsheets. Sure, someone's got to do that in assisted living and memory care too, but spreadsheets ain't going to take care of your grandma. It's going to be people. So you got to be able to lead people.
And that's a heart that I so appreciate about you. Like, it's all about the people and the relationships and, like running things in a way that brings so much respect and dignity to this, to these, this generation as they are, at the golden years, I suppose. Right. So I just want to thank you again, Loe. Thanks for being you, because you do come at this in a completely different way, and it's very well, it's needed. And I'm excited to see where this goes and how you continue to inspire the people in the world to level up in this particular area. And to everyone who was able to come today live, I am so grateful for you. I want to stick to our time frame. Loe, do you mind dropping? Yep, done. So if you want to get in touch with Loe, do you want to just give them the best way if they have other questions? If you're not a tire kicker and you really want to be part of change.
Yeah, putting both in. One's the capital raising company and the other's the assisted living company. So Goodhorn Capital, it has capital in the name. You guys are smart, you'll figure it out. If it's assisted living or memory care related, that's the deal there. And then there's some concept videos and all of our stuff as well. And then Goodhorn Capital actually has a copy of my book. You can put your email in and it'll give you a copy of it. It's a pretty terrible book, but it's an easy read anyway.
I know, which means it's a really great book. Everybody already gets your sarcasm now. They spent time with you. They know. They know how awesome you are.
It's an interesting book if you want to get in the business, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Loe, thank you again. And thanks everyone. And until next month, we will see you on the social spheres. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.